Hello and welcome. Let's take a look at what we will be creating. We are going to create two weight converter tools. One would be to convert from pounds to kilogram, and the other would be to convert from kilograms to pounds. So this is the pounds to kilograms. So basically you enter your weight in pounds. Say for example, if you're 120 pounds, and it will convert it to the equivalent in kilograms. The second tool will convert the weight in kilograms to the equivalent in pounds. So for example, if my weight in kilogram is 80, it will give me the conversion in pounds, which is 176 pounds. The code used for both tool is very identical, so we'll make it much easier to understand. So that's it. I look forward to showing you how to create these converter tools. Thanks for watching and bye for now. Hello and welcome. In this video we are going to create the project directory and also add the HTML. So I'm going to create a directory on my desktop just by right-clicking on a blank space. I'll click on New Folder, and I'm just going to call this folder Weight Conversion. Feel free to call it whatever name you like. I will be using the Sublime Text Editor for this part of the project. So I'm going to do the kilogram to pound conversion first. So this HTML file, I'm going to save it as, I'm saving it into the directory that I created, and I'm going to call it kg to pound. So it's going to be called kg to pound.html. I'll click save. So this file now will be an HTML file. So if you look on the bottom right hand corner, it's got HTML on it. So I have already pre-staged the HTML code. To make things easier, I'm going to add it on and explain the code to you line by line. I have added the HTML for the kilogram to pound weight converter. So I'm going to run through the code line by line. Line 1 here is the doc type. The doc type is the first thing you have to indicate inside an HTML document. What this is saying, basically, this is not actually part of the HTML document itself. It's just a declaration to notify web browsers that the content of this document is HTML5. So that's what the doc type does. The actual HTML begins on line 2 and ends on line 23. So any content between line 2 and 23 is the actual HTML content. Line 3 here is the head section. That's the opening head section, and this is the closing head section on line 6. Inside the head section, I've got a title, which will display in the title bar of the web browser. This will be the title for the application. It will say kilograms to pounds weight converter. So that's the opening title tag. That's the closing title tag. Here on line 5, I got a link to an external style sheet I'm going to be using. I've already given it a name called kg2p.css. I will be creating that soon, probably in the next lecture. And this is just some attributes associated with the link. So this is a relative link, tells you it's a style sheet. The type is a text/CSS. href basically determines where the style sheet will be located. Because it's going to be located inside the same directory, all I need to do is just specify the name for the style sheet, and the name I'm going to call it is kg2p.css. So that concludes the head section. So the body section begins on line 7 and ends on line 22. So the actual visible content is inside the body tag. I am wrapping the actual content inside a div. A div basically is a division of a page, and for a web page where you section off an area. So I've decided to call this, giving this div an ID attribute. I'll be using this ID attribute to style it later with CSS. I've given it an ID of container because it's going to contain all the other elements we need. And here on line 9, I've given it a title. This will be the title for the conversion. It will say weight converter, kg to pounds. Here, this is a paragraph tag where it's prompting the user to enter their weight value in kilograms. Look here, I've got another paragraph tag here, and in between this paragraph tag, I've got a label. Basically, a label will just display a text label, and it's going to display kilograms. That's the first label. And then after that label, we have an input ID. This is going to be where they will input the value in kilograms. So I've given the input ID an ID value of input kilograms. It's the type is going to be a number, and there is a placeholder called kilogram. So you have the placeholder kilogram inside, and here we've got the on input attribute. So basically we're saying when you input a value, it will call this weight converter. This is going to be a JavaScript function that I will be creating later. So when you input a value, this function here will do the conversion using the value you have inputted. Okay, so it's going to use the this keyword in combination with the value to do the conversion. And when the value changes, this onChange attribute also will call this function again and change it to the new value you've added. So each time you change the value in the input, it will contact this function here, which is a JavaScript function, and that will display the new value. On line 16, I've got another paragraph here. This is a paragraph that would actually output the conversion weight in pounds. So it will say your weight in pounds, and notice I've got a span element here. So this span basically will add the value of this output pounds, whatever the output, the conversion is, it will add that to this text here. So it will say your weight in pounds is whatever value that this function has computed. It will add that to this. So that's where we have the span element here. All right, so this is a closing div, and on line 20 here, I've got a script tag. I'm going to be using an external JavaScript, and this SROC basically is the source. It's asking where to pick up the JavaScript file from. So it's going to be in the same directory as the HTML and CSS. So all I need to do is specify the name. So I've called it kg2p.js, which is the name I will give it when I create it. So that's basically the HTML completed. So I'm just going to click on File and Save All, and then we can quickly run it and see what it looks like. So I'm just going to open up the directory and just double click on this kg2p, and we can see what it looks like. So this is what it looks like at the moment, which is exactly what I want. This is the placeholder here. It's got kilogram. You can see because the value of the input is a number, hence you have these. So you can use this to add the number, or you can manually add the numbers. Nothing will happen at the moment because I've not added the JavaScript functionality yet. But when I do, it will display the conversion here. So that's it for this lecture. In the next lecture, I am going to add the JavaScript functionality. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. Hello and welcome to this video. In this video, we are going to add the JavaScript functionality that will make the conversion tool work. Inside our HTML, I already made a reference to the external JavaScript. So now we're going to create the file. So I'm going to click on File, New, and I'll save this file. I'll do Save As, and I'm going to call it kg2pound.js, and I'll click Save. So if you look on the bottom right hand corner, it's now showing as JavaScript. So any code I add in here will be a JavaScript code. I've already pre-staged the code, so I'm going to add it on and explain the code line by line. So I've added the JavaScript code. It's not a lot. I'll just run through that with you. I've created a function called weight converter, and inside the parentheses I passed in the value number. So basically this will represent the number you pass into the input. If you're converting from kilograms to pound, 1 pound is equivalent of 2.2046 kilogram. Hence I've created a variable here on line 2 called val number. This will represent the value of the number you're inputting, and I've set that to equal to the value of that number times 2.2046. This is because 1 pound is equivalent to 2.2046 in kilogram. And here on line 3 I've created a variable called n, and I've set that to equals to this variable called value number dot to fix. This is a method that you can use to round up to decimal places. So you put the value of the decimal places you want to round it to. For example, if you want the values to be rounded up to 1 decimal place, you put 1. If you want 2 decimal places, you put 2. In my case, I don't want any decimal places, so I just want a round number. So it's going to fix that so that there's zero numbers after the numbers. So it's just going to return a whole number. And line 4 here is the document.getElementById, and this ID is referring to is called output pounds. So it's telling you to output the value in pounds. And if we come here to our HTML, we can see reference to that ID I'm talking about here. So I've got an ID here. This is the ID it's talking about, ID output pounds. Okay, so this is a span ID, and that's what I'm referring to here. So it will get this value here and then replace it with the inner HTML. So it will use the value of this n, which is here. If we go into our HTML, you can see here inside the JavaScript here, I've got a variable called n, and this is the value I'm giving it. So it will grab the document.getElementById. This method will grab this span element, which is in the HTML, called output pounds, and it will replace that with the value of n. So you can see this is a value of n. All right, so let's save that and let's test the application. I'll click Save All. So I'm going to open up the directory and click on the HTML file to run it. So now if I put in a value in kilograms, so let's say we'll say 95, you can see it's giving me the corresponding value in pounds. So the actual functionality of the conversion tool is working. In the next lecture, I'm just going to make it look a little bit nicer by adding some CSS. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. Hello and welcome. In this video, I will be adding some very basic CSS to make the application look a bit nicer. So inside our HTML here, we've already got a reference to an external style sheet, and I've called it kg2p.css. So I'm going to create that file now by going to the file option, clicking on new file, and I'm going to save it as inside the same directory, and I'll call it kg2 lowercase kg2p.css. So need to make sure the name matches the name I have given it inside the HTML, which is kg2p.css, and I'll click save. So I just want to double check and go into my HTML. So I've called it kg2p.css, and you can see here is kg2p.css, because if the name does not match, the CSS will not work because it cannot link it correctly to the name I have given it inside the href attribute. So I'm going to open the CSS file, and I'm just going to add, the only thing I'm going to style here is this container here, this div container, this div ID. I'm going to style that using the ID. So I'm just going to add the code in. So this is the code basically for that container. And so these are just standard CSS. So I've given it a width of 500 pixels, height of 250 pixels. I would advise you to just play around with these values, try and add your own values and see what it looks like. So try and customize it as much as possible to your own taste. So I've given it a background color of purple. I've used, that is the actual name of the colors, but you can also use hexadecimal color values if you wish to. If you're familiar with them, you can use that as well. Color here basically refers to the text. Any text inside this div will be white. Margin from the top, this area here is known as the top. So basically I'm saying from the top, I want the div to drop down 60 pixels. Margin from the left, this area here is the left. I'm saying I want the div to move from the left 300 pixels from the page. Padding refers to the space inside the element, while margin refers to the space outside the element. So this area can be outside and anything in here is inside. So I'm saying from inside the div element, I want there to be a padding from the left, so it creates some space inside and 30 pixels, and padding from the top 20 pixels. So padding, margin, they work the same way, just that margin refers to spaces outside, while padding refers to the space inside. So that's basically the CSS I will be using. I'm just going to click on File, Save All, and then we can go ahead and test it. So to test, I'm just going to click on the directory and run the kg2p HTML file. Double click on that, and you can see we have a better looking weight conversion tool. So again, I type in, let's say I type in 85 kilos, gives me the corresponding result in pounds. So next we are going to do the conversion from pounds to kilogram. The code is going to be identical. There's only going to be a slight change in the code, and I'll tell you where the slight change is. So that's it for this lecture. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. Hello and welcome. In this video, I'm going to quickly run through the pounds to kilogram conversion tool. The code is very identical for the code we use for the kilogram to pound conversion. So I'm not going to explain too much because the code is identical. I will only focus on the areas that are different. So this is the HTML for the pounds to kilogram. I've called it p2kg.html, and I've saved it inside the same directory as the kilogram to pound conversion. So all the files are going to be in the same directory, but I've given them different names. So this is the HTML for the pounds to kilogram, which I have called p2kg.html. So the HTML is basically the same. The only thing that has changed here is the title. So I've changed the title to pounds to kilogram weight converter. The CSS is, all I've done is change the name of the CSS. So they both going to use the same CSS. So I've just changed the name. Container, the same thing. Again, the code is the same. All I've done here is change the title for the H1 tag to weight converter in pounds. Here, I've got enter your weight value in pounds because we're converting from pounds to kilos. Here the label obviously is changed, so where we had the label in kilograms, when we do the kilogram one, here we've got a label saying pounds, so they're going to input the value in pounds. Also, the input ID has changed, where in the kilogram to pound we were inputting kilograms, now we are inputting pounds. The type is a number, the type of input, and then the placeholder, inside the placeholder we're just going to have pounds in there. And then on input, again we're going to use the same function. I've called it the same name, weight converter function, and this will grab whatever value you input into this input field. And this basically is a keyword that is used to access the current value, and this function here called weight converter will do the conversion from pounds to kilogram. On change this method, basically this attribute here will call this function when the value changes. So each time you enter a new value into the input, it will trigger this on change here event, and that will call this function. Okay, and whatever value you've entered will be recalculated. Again, this is just a paragraph that will input the value of the calculated conversion. It will append that using the span element to this text here. Line 22 is just a reference to the external JavaScript. Again, like the kilogram to pound, I've just called it pound to kg. So very basic stuff, similar to what we did with the kilogram to pound conversion. So this is the HTML. Let's take a look at the JavaScript. So this is the JavaScript I've used for the pounds to kilogram. It's basically the same thing as we did with the kilogram to pound. Again, we've got a function called weight converter. We are grabbing the value of the number that is passed into the input field. Here I've created two variables, one for the value of the number, and I've set that to equals to the value of number. The only difference here with the pounds to kilogram conversion, we multiplied. So 1 kilogram basically is going to be divided by this. So to get the value of the conversion, you divide, okay, by this number. Remember when we did the kg to pound, we multiplied. So here we are dividing rather than multiply. So we're multiplying the value by 2.2046. So that's the key difference between the two. Kilogram to pound, you multiply this value. Pound to kilogram, you divide the value. And we've got a variable here called n. We're grabbing this variable here and we're using this toFix method to round up the value to 0 decimal places, so we can just get whole numbers outputted rather than several numbers. So if you wanted to prefix yours to 2 decimal places, you can just put 2 there, but I've put in a 0 because I don't want any decimal places, hence I've put in a value of 0. Again, like the kilogram to pound conversion, we're using the document okay element by ID, and we're getting this output kilogram. So if we go into the HTML, this is what we're grabbing. This is the ID of the span element here. We're grabbing that, and then whatever value is inputted from the value of this calculation, we are going to add that to this output kilograms. So if you go here, you can see this output kilogram says, so it's going to append this to this. It will say your weight in kilogram is whatever we've outputted for that kilogram. So that's basically it. All right, so the code is basically complete, is identical to what we did with the kilogram to pound conversion. The only key difference is that with the kilogram to pounds, you multiply by this number, whereas with the pound to kilogram conversion, you are dividing by this number. Again, the CSS, I have used exactly the same CSS for this pound to kilogram conversion tool, because all I'm doing is styling the ID container, which I have used to be, the only thing I've done is just change the color. Where the kilogram to pound, I use a purple color for the background. Here I'm using a blue color for the background. So that's basically it. So let me save that and then we can run it. So these are all the files inside the same directory. So the one we've just created here is the pound to kilogram. So when you're running your files, it's the HTML file you need to run because it's linked to the other file. So I'm going to run the pound to kilogram conversion tool, which is this one. Double click and you can see if I type in a value in pound, you can see it gives me the corresponding value in kilograms. So this concludes the project. If you have any issues at all, please do not hesitate to contact me. I'll be more than happy to assist. Thanks very much. Take care and all the best. Bye for now.